So this is part 2 of depressants. So we're going to start with alcohol. So there are 3 types of alcohol, but the one we're going to focus obviously on is on beverage alcohol or ethyl alcohol. So alcohol is the most commonly abused psychoactive substance worldwide. It's natural irritant to the body, travels wherever the blood flows, and this explains why it affects so many systems in the body. So alcohol is unique in that it's not neurotransmitter specific. So most substances affect one type of neurotransmitter, but alcohol actually affects quite a number of them. So it looks at affects GABA, which is a depressant. It activates serotonin, and endogenous morphine and glutamate, stimulates dopamine release in the reward systems of the brain, again why it becomes quite addictive. It's primarily a depressant drug. It slows the central nervous system. In short-term effects, it relaxes, loss of inhibition, impaired coordination, slows reflexes and mental process, attitude changes, and risk-taking. And then drinking heavily over a short period of time, the poisoning effect called the hangover. So really that is the withdrawal from alcohol. It's our body's reaction to having too much alcohol, in reaction to being poisoned and being dehydrated and withdrawing. So that's why you become very sick after you drink too much alcohol. So alcohol, how much alcohol is in your system is measured by your blood alcohol concentration, or BAC. So alcohol content varies from product to product, so there's different amounts of alcohol in beer versus wine versus liquor. And the amount of alcohol that needs to be consumed to reach a specific blood alcohol concentration varies based on weight and sex, so if you're male or female. So female doesn't need as much alcohol as male to become the same level of intoxicated, and somebody who's heavier needs more alcohol than somebody who's lighter. So other things that impact tolerance to alcohol would be also age, would also impact how much alcohol you might need. So somebody who's older probably would need much less alcohol than somebody who's younger to become intoxicated. So there's a chart here that shows at what level of blood alcohol concentration and what effect the body is having. So everything from a level so 0.08. So here this is percentages, so it's at 80%. So if you look at it in a decimal form, it's 0.08, which is the legal limit of impairment in Canada. So at that point, you can be charged with a drug, impaired driving. So all the way up to 5 milligrams of or 5 milligram percent in the blood alcohol concentration, that can be a fatal dose. So it's a wide range of how much alcohol can affect the body. So after regular long-term use, it can damage every human organ system. So there's really not a system in the body that's not impacted by alcohol use. So withdrawal from alcohol, so someone who is dependent on alcohol who stops drinking, this is when you have a withdrawal. So symptoms usually peak within 13 to 18 hours after your last drink, and then this withdrawal can last up to 5 days. So somebody who's been using alcohol for a long period of time and then stop can experience hallucinations, psychomotor agitation, so feeling antsy and irritable, and acute anxiety. Some people might also experience something called delirium tremens, or also the DTs it's called. So this peaks about 3 days after the last drink. So this is actually pretty dangerous. It includes things like paranoia, disorientation, intense restlessness, fever, and sweating. Alcohol overdose is again very dangerous, and probably it needs to be treated by a physician. So confused thinking, poor judgment, mood swings, poor concentration, muscle coordination problems, slurred speech, nausea, vomiting, sleeplessness, memory lapses, and it can also lead to respiratory failure. So literally your lungs and your heart stop, and it can lead to coma and death. So some pharmacological interventions. So these are medications that are sometimes prescribed to somebody who's either trying to stop drinking alcohol or need to stop drinking alcohol. So there's 3 types. So antidipsotropics, opioid antagonists, and acamprosate are the three types. So reactions to the antidipsotropics, things like antabuse and Temposil, they disrupt the body's ability to metabolize the alcohol, which then cause extremely unpleasant reaction when the alcohol is consumed. So like vomiting, dizziness, skin flushing. So you're pretty sick if you take the medication and then you drink alcohol. It's pretty immediate. It can take up to 2 weeks after the last dose of the medication for the body to metabolize alcohol again. So if you take a medication today, it'll take about 2 weeks before you can drink alcohol again without feeling these effects. These medications work best when combined with alcohol or addictions counseling. So you need to be talking to the person about how they can cope with the urges to drink as well, not just taking the medication. Opioid agonists are sometimes also prescribed, so things like naltrexone. These are specifically developed to reverse opioid overdose, but when taken prior to drinking alcohol, it decreases the pleasurable effects. But you can still become intoxicated, but you're not getting the feelings of good time and euphoria when you drink alcohol. Relapse rates of alcohol are less with naltrexone than with counseling alone. So somebody who takes naltrexone and also drinks, they're less likely to want to keep drinking because they're not getting the pleasurable experience out of the drinking. The acamprosate, it balances the GABA levels in the brain, thereby reducing physical and emotional distress of those dependent upon alcohol. So it's actually helping to stabilize their mood, and then it reduces withdrawal symptoms. So lots of information here. I'd like you to take a minute to pause this and go into each of these websites. So the first one is looking at the KMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. Very large website, teaching hospital in Toronto, has a lot of good information about all types of substances, addictions, mental health, all kinds of information. This is a pamphlet for youth around alcohol, so just something, it gives a good snapshot of all the different impacts alcohol can have, and then also the low risk drinking guidelines. So this would be something from the CCSA that you can take a look at as well. So now we're moving into opioids. So opioids are classified as central nervous system depressant. So they work on the neurotransmitter endorphins. Opioids mask pain. So that is essentially what opioids are meant to do. They're helping to treat pain. Most opioids were created or used to treat after surgery or more other kind of pain. So when opioids are masking pain, it also increases the firing dopamine receptors, leading to feelings of euphoria. So unfortunately, even though it is helping with pain management, it's actually causing dopamine to fire, which means that you're having a good feeling, which can increase risk of addiction. So when tolerance begins with opioids, the feelings of euphoria diminish, but the risk of other depressing effects like respiratory depression are still high. So even though you're developing tolerance, you're not getting the feel-good feelings anymore from the opioids, but the other overdose risks are still there. So also decreases gastrointestinal motility, so you're having issues with gastrointestinal systems, spinal analgesia, sedation, shortness of breath, anxiety, tolerance, withdrawal, and dependency. So opioids can be administered in the body in various ways. So it can be pills, all three forms of injection, mucous membrane, across the mucous membrane, and transdermally through a patch. So that's like a fentanyl patch. So there's many different types of opioids. There's some that are natural, semi-synthetic, and synthetic forms, all of which are endogenous endomorphin neurotransmitters, meaning that in the brain there are receptors that are meant to receive the opioid-like neurotransmitters that are already in our brains and that are already accepting of those. So opioids, they decrease central nervous system functioning, so they mask the physical and psychological perceptions of pain while producing euphoria. They alter the autonomic nervous system, so it slows down the gastrointestinal tract, so it's actually your digestive system. Cough suppression, so like codeine, is actually helpful for cough suppression, depression of cardiac, respiratory, and vasomotor centers, so your heart, lungs, and blood pressure. So it's slowing those down. So can be very dangerous if you're taking too much. Using medicine to relieve acute pain, coughs, and diarrhea. So it actually slows down your digestive system. So if you're having issues with diarrhea, then that's actually a way to stop that. If used properly and generally benign on the body, so it's not going to cause a lot of problems if you're using it properly. The problem arises due to lifestyle of users. So it's if you're starting to overuse the medication or use it improperly, then that's where the issues begin. Tolerance can develop within days of continuous use. So tolerance develops to effects of the opioids, including respiratory depression, analgesia, sedation, nausea, and enhancement of mood. Regular use becomes psychological and physical dependent upon opioids, and then they also have significant dependence liability. So it doesn't take long to become tolerant and dependent on these medications. Withdrawal. So it can begin as soon as hours after the last administration, so it doesn't take long to feel the effects of withdrawal. So feelings of uneasiness, yawning, tears, diarrhea, abdominal cramps, goosebumps, and runny nose. Pain associated with withdrawal can feel very severe. And of course, there'd be significant craving for the drug if the pain of withdrawal starts so quickly. You have cravings pretty quickly. Withdrawal symptoms usually peak within 48 to 72 hours and subside after 10 days, so it's a week and a half. Withdrawal isn't life-threatening, unlike alcohol and barbiturates, so it's just like having a significant, serious flu for a long period of time, but it's not. You won't die from withdrawal. Overdose, on the other hand, is a significant risk. So looking at coma, depressed respiration, so slowing of breathing, and pinpoint pupils. Death almost always occurs due to respiratory depression a few hours after taking the substance. So there's a link here for the Peterborough Drug Strategy. So it's a local strategy that's involved with looking at overdose prevention, especially of opioids. So it's looking at naloxone and looking at free take-home kits of naloxone. So anybody who's might be involved with substance use or have friends that are using or work in clinics that they might see somebody come in with an overdose, you can have a free kit to take with you in case of somebody overdosing. There are many types of opioids, so they're all very similar, some of which are natural occurring and some of which are synthetic and some of which are semi-synthetic. So natural occurring would be taken right from the opium poppy, while the synthetic are completely man-made, and then there's ones that are a mix of both. So buprenorphine is a semi-synthetic. It stays in the body longer and the effects last longer. So this blocks other opioids. So it's an opioid antagonist, like Suboxone, and as an alternative to methadone. So I have slides 28 and 25 within this PowerPoint. So moving down farther, we'll talk about those later. Desomorphine is a synthetic opioid, and it's illegal. The slang, crocodile, it's a scaly skin around the injection site. So when it's injected, it actually causes a scaly skin effect. Brief but powerful analgesic effect. Codeine is usually combined with Tylenol, and that's what you get T3s. It's Tylenol plus codeine, and it's a natural opioid. Fentanyl, you hear a lot about that in the news right now. So it's a synthetic opioid. It's analgesic and an anesthetic, available in many administration forms. The one that we know most about is the patch. More potent than heroin and morphine. And there's a lot of abuse issues around that, obviously. So there is a link here from the CCSA drug alerts regarding fentanyl-related overdoses. I know it says 2015, but this continues to be a significant concern today. So I'm going to pause it here and move on to part 3.